This shiur is called Fast or Feast. Tisha B'Av as the holiday of tragedy. I would like to start with a very well-known halakha. We all know the halakha that there are no tachanunim on Tisha B'Av, which makes it unusual amongst fast days. That all other fast days are days that we, of course, not only say tachanunim, but we typically have an extensive additional selichot. We don't only say tachanunim, we have the extra selichot of the day that are specific to that day. Asara b'tevet, Shiva Asar b'Tammuz, even Ta'anit Esther has selichot. So, and yet Tisha B'Av, the most intense of all of the fast days, and there's no tachanunim at all. It's a very unusual thing. Now, one way to explain it might be that also in a house of Shiva there's no tachanunim. When you're mourning, there's no tachanun. But that's not actually the reason that's brought down. The key reason that's brought down for why there's no tachanunim. Does anybody know why? Why? Because it's Ikre Moed. It's called a Moed, right? In Sefer Zechariah it says that all of these tzomot, Ko Amar Hashem, Tzevaot, Tzomar Revi'i, Tzomar Chamishi, etc. You Levet Yisrael, Levet Yehuda, L'Sason L'Simcha, U'Lemoadim Tovim. They're going to be Moadim. So what about the other? So that's of course the question. Why don't we do that? So why not on Shiva Asar b'Tammuz? Why don't we apply the same rule? That's a question to which I don't have a convincing or persuasive answer to offer you. I've wondered it myself for many years. However, perhaps because Tisha B'Av is the only real tzom that we observe. Really, the other tzomot are considered to be observed in an incomplete fashion. They're not a real Tanit Tzibur because there's no, we don't observe the 5 Inuyim, we don't observe all 5 of the restrictions. It's not a full, absolute Tanit. So there's some, that could be part of the reason, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure the answer to that. But certainly Ikre Moed is the reason why we don't say Tachanunim, according to what the Poskim bring as the primary reason. Why that doesn't apply to the other tzomot, we have to leave that as a tzarich iyun. I don't know the answer. But it's certainly applicable here. So the question is, of course, normally we're not so concerned with future trajectory. I mean, we say Ba'asher Husham. Right now, we look at the right now. I mean, the fact is, right now, this is the saddest day of the year. It's a day of tragedy. It's a depressing day. I mean, why should we be thinking about the fact that it's going to be? That sounds like what we call nechama. When we have consolation, and at mincha, we start to speak of consolation and all the nivuot of nachamu ami, and of course Shabbat nachamu. But right now we're at shacharit. Certainly not. I mean, why should we be thinking about the fact that it's going to be a moed in Be'ezrat Hashem very soon? But we don't know that. Right now, that's a distraction from the fact that we're supposed to be mourning what we're supposed to be mourning. We're not supposed to be celebrating. So the fact that it's a moed would seem to be, a theoretical truth, but it shouldn't really impact the way we observe the holiday now. And I wanted to show you something very interesting. And initially I had sheets, but they weren't copied in a timely manner. So because I couldn't find it. So and then when I found it was too late. So now I will give you the psukim. In Echa, you might have noticed that the word moed appears quite a lot. Did anybody notice that in Megillat Echa the word moed appears several times? In fact, in 2 different contexts, in 2 different ways. One way is when it's speaking about the Moadim of the Jewish people, and it says Shikach Hashem B'Tzion Moed V'Shabbat, for example. Hashem caused Moed and Shabbat to be forgotten. Or it says Darchei Tzion Avelot Mibili Ba'e Moed, that the ways to Tzion, the ways to Jerusalem, the roads are desolate. They're mourning Avelot because they don't have the people coming up Moed for the Moed. So this is these are ways in which Moed is referring to holidays as we know them. But there's another kind of Moed that is mentioned in Echa, and this is the Moed of destruction. Tikra kayom Moed megurai misaviv. Hashem, you established a Moed, you made a holiday for all of those who dwelt around me to come destroy me. V'lo haya b'yom ha'af Hashem balid v'sarid. Right, so there are psukim where the Moed is the holiday of the oivim, the holiday of the enemies coming in to destroy the Beit HaMikdash. It's called the Moed. Very interesting. And it also says, right, Kara alai moed lishbor bachurai. Hashem declared a moed, a holiday, to crush my young men. In other words, to destroy us in battle. What kind of a moed is that? It's an ironic use of the word moed, obviously. It's a sarcastic almost use of the word moed, especially in view of the fact that the Megillah is talking about how the real moadim, the moed of Hashem, moedei Hashem, are no longer going to be observed properly, but there's one moed that Hashem kept. Kara alai moed lishbor bachurai. He made a moed to destroy us. So this kind of moed we don't want. Or it says, Kol natinu bebeit Hashem ki yom moed. That when they came to destroy the Beit HaMikdash, there was a sound like the day of a moed. Now you could see the irony, right? Literally, from a literary perspective, obviously the Navi is bringing out the irony. Imagine the Beit HaMikdash full with a loud sound. Right? It's bustling, it's active. What is it supposed to be? Moed, it's a holiday. Chagim. Everybody came to Chagim. What is it instead? People destroying the Beit HaMikdash. Instead of the Beit HaMikdash fulfilling its purpose, it's the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. So there's an irony and a sarcasm and a tragic contrast in the term moed as it's used in Megillat Echa. But I wanted to take it a little bit further.
It's not only referring to the Beit HaMikdash, it's referring to battle and things like
Battle also, right. So in general, the destruction, the word moed is used, but Shikach Hashem b'tzion moed v'shavat doesn't just mean in the Beit HaMikdash. It means that even the way we observe the moadim in Chutz Haaretz, it's inferior. Lishbor bachurai is to kill the. That's the negative moed.
It's in battle.
Right, in battle. So the idea of using the word moed though as an appointed time is trying to draw the stark contrast between the appointed times, the Moadim, the Moedei Hashem, which were celebrated in the Beit HaMikdash, where Jerusalem would be animated with the life force of the people rushing up the, envision, the roads to Jerusalem packed with people coming up to serve Hashem in the Beit HaMikdash. Instead, they're empty and desolate because nobody's going. I mean, the contrast is clear. But the Moed feature of Tisha B'Av is not just restricted to literary devices in Megillat Echa. If you look at the way Tisha B'Av is observed, I would call it the anti-holiday. In many ways, Tisha B'Av is observed like a Chag. It's like a holiday. But it's a holiday from the bad place, from Gehinom. It's a holiday from Gehinom, basically. Why? Well, look at the structure of the day. We all come to synagogue. Everyone comes to Beit Knesset. We have a tefillah, special readings at night, special readings during the day. Instead of it being Hallel, it's Kinot. Instead of reading, let's say, Megillat Ruth for Shavuot, okay, or Megillat, whatever the Megillot are. So, we don't, among Sfaradim, we don't necessarily read the Megillot on all of the Chagim. We don't read, I don't know what the minhag is, but I don't think most Sfaradim, they don't read like Shir HaShirim on Pesach and things like that. But it's associated with the holiday in Masechet Sofrim. So there are ideas of Megillot being read on the various Chagim, for sure. It has a foundation in earlier sources. That these Megillot are associated with the Chagim. Kohelet is associated with Sukkot, even though we don't read it, and Shir HaShirim is associated with Pesach, even though we don't necessarily read it on that day. The idea being that there's a special Megillah for that day. Obviously, Purim has its own Megillah. And then you have Megillat Echa. You have a Torah reading. You have something that really stands out on Tisha B'Av morning. You know what really stands out on Tisha B'Av morning? What do you never have on a weekday?
No tefillin, talit.
Huh? That's true. Well, the reason for no tefillin and talit is because of avelut, because of mourning. You have a haftarah. You're not allowed to have a haftarah during the week. You're not allowed to. Even on Purim, we don't have a haftarah. We read the Megillah. Not allowed to have a haftarah. Ein maftirin benavi. It says in the Mishnah in Masechet Megillah. You have 3 olim. You're not allowed to have more. And ein maftirin benavi. You never have a maftir. You never have haftarah on a regular day. Even Chol HaMoed, you don't have it. So what does that underscore for you in a way? This is like a chag. Why did the Rabbanut of Israel... I always had this ta'ana against the Rabbanut of Israel. Not that I'm anybody, but I used to say, how come the Yom HaAtzmaut they have a haftarah? It says right in the Mishnah, you're not allowed to have a haftarah. on the weekday. They have a haftarah. They don't say barachot, but they have a haftarah. I said, we don't even have a haftarah on Chol HaMoed. We don't even have a haftarah on Purim. How could you have a haftarah on Yom HaAtzmaut? But they wanted Yom HaAtzmaut to be a full chag. They want people to recognize, this is a chag. You don't go to work, you celebrate, it's a big deal. So to make that point, putting a haftarah on Tisha B'Av is a way of emphasizing that it is like a chag. A ta'anit tzibur, a full ta'anit tzibur like this, has a chag quality to it. You have a special Torah reading, it's not the regular one. It's not even the regular one for a fast. The one of Tisha B'Av morning. It's unique to Tisha B'Av. And you have a haftarah unique to Tisha B'Av. And you have a Megillah unique to Tisha B'Av. And you even have prohibitions against melacha. It's not a formal prohibition, it's a minhag. It's a minhag. And it says if you work on Tisha B'Av, eino ro'eh siman beracha. Right? You're not going to see a sign of beracha from the work that you do on Tisha B'Av. What's the other analogy to that? What other area of halacha do we find where there's a minhag discouraging doing work? There's actually not a minhag on Chol HaMoed not to work. There's another one. Purim. Purim is the one. You're not supposed to do work at all. It's not a minhag.
It's halacha.
Right. Well, you're allowed to do masao matan. You're allowed to do business. You're just not allowed to. You're not supposed to do work of a type that's prohibited on Chol HaMoed, which is a whole other area. But you're allowed to buy and sell and things like that, and be in business on Chol HaMoed. You're allowed to. So on Purim, you're not supposed to be involved in your work activities. It's a minhag not to. It's highly discouraged. You have the same thing, Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av even has its own special halachot of a meal before the fast. The meal before the fast, of course, is a meal that is supposed to be the negation of everything that a Yom Tov meal would be, right? If you think about it, what a Yom Tov meal is supposed to be, it's everything the opposite of what it's supposed to be, to set the tone for, as opposed to, let's say, Yom Kippur. When we go into Yom Kippur, we have a festive meal, a simcha. We're getting kaparat avonot, the happy meal, right? But in Erev Tisha B'Av, it's not. So it has many of the trappings, and the most interesting is the kinot, because kinot is really the reverse of like Hallel. If you think of Hallel is special readings of Mizmorim from Tehillim that we're praising Hashem for His special providence that He extended to us, for the beracha that He's bestowed upon us. There's both a spiritual and a physical element to every chag. Every chag has its physical beracha. Every chag has the spiritual beracha. Look at Pesach. We have the freedom, the political freedom. We have the barley harvest also. And we have the spiritual freedom, obviously, from Mitzrayim. Shavuot is both a time of harvest as well as a time of Matan Torah. Sukkot is a time of ingathering of the harvest. It's also a time that we remember Hashem's protection of us in the wilderness. So you have spiritual elements and you have physical elements in all of the holidays. And the same is true in Tisha B'Av. Because in Tisha B'Av you have the sheer horror of the physical destruction, of the children murdered or consumed, or the young people dying, righteous people being slaughtered for no cause. I mean, terrible physical damage, the destruction of the physical Beit HaMikdash, being poor, being persecuted, being exiled. All of these things are terrible on a physical level. And then you have on a spiritual level, obviously, Shikach Hashem B'tzion Moed V'Shabbat. I mean, that Hashem caused the Jewish people to forget Shabbat. They don't know what a Shabbat is. We don't know what a Shabbat is today. We don't know what a real Moed is today. We don't know what a real holiday is today. We don't know the experience. We don't have it. Without the Beit HaMikdash, without a national center of Avodat Hashem, we don't have that experience. So one of the Psukim says, in Torah. Malka B'Zera Bagoyim in Torah. There's no Torah anymore. We don't have any Nevi'im. There's no Nivu'ah, there's no Torah. We don't have a sense of Hashem's wisdom anymore with us at the form that now there's a million rabbis with a million opinions and a million different ideologies and a million different schools of thought. We don't have the sense of unity of a single body of Chachamim that are helping us to develop our understanding of Torah, that are speaking to one another, not just to their own constituents and their own students, but really trying to create a community of Torah, a worldwide community of Torah, a national community of Torah. We don't have that. There's so much missing spiritually from the Jewish people today that we are so gone, like Yechezkel talks about the dry bones. We are like a set of dry bones. We don't even realize what we're missing, that we're not really a cohesive group. there isn't really one spirit animating the Jewish people. And that's both a physical detriment to us and a spiritual detriment, a tremendous spiritual detriment that we don't have. There's no conversation going on between different groups in Judaism. There's no one Torah anymore. There's no one Chag anymore. There's no one Shabbat anymore like there was supposed to be. So all of these losses are cataloged, obviously in Echa, but are elaborated upon as well in the Kinot. And the Kinot are like the Hallel of Tisha B'Av. A Hallel is usually an expression of joy, perceiving the Beracha, the Birkat Hashem. Birkat Hashem. And what is the Kina? The Kina is an expression of sadness and Evel on the Klala, the curse that we've received. In other words, the negative. It's, if you think of the Berachot and the Klalot in the Torah as really the template upon which everything is based. When things are going well, it's Beracha. When things are going poorly, it's Klala. This is what the Kinot are recounting to us. They're sensitizing us to the Avelut, the same way the Hallel would sensitize us to the joy of that holiday. We even have a Seder Limud on Tisha B'Av. You know that there's an idea in Yom Tov of a person supposed to do Chetzi Lashem v'Chetzi Lachem. They're supposed to have half the day in Avodat Hashem, half the day in food and drink, right? Eating and drinking. So half the day you're supposed to be learning Torah, and specifically what does it say it's supposed to be? Things that relate to the holiday. Ideally, right? That's it's supposed to be Inyana, Inyana Diyoma they call it, the matters that relate to that day. It says Moshe Rabbeinu was Tiken Lahem Yisrael Shu Korein, that they should read on every holiday. Moshe Rabbeinu said they should read on every holiday the Torah reading that's applicable to that day. We read about Pesach on Pesach, we read about Sukkot on Sukkot. What's the reason? People don't understand what a Torah reading is.
Reason for what?
For why do we have to have a Torah reading that's germane to that day, that's relevant to that day? The Torah reading really is always supposed to be, and this is what people don't understand, it's supposed to be, many people don't appreciate, they just think of the Torah reading as like a ritual. The Torah reading is supposed to set the educational tone of the day. That is the Torah, that's setting the curriculum of the day. So we have a yearly curriculum that we cycle through the entire Torah, 52 weeks a year. And we also have special curricula that apply to specific times of the year. Sometimes it's reflected in the Haftarah of the day, sometimes it's reflected in the Torah also of the day. And so the Torah reading of any given day, we have to look at it and say, my study really should be centered around whatever's in the Torah reading, because the Torah reading is what is going to sets the agenda, the learning agenda for that day, or is supposed to, in some measure, set the learning agenda to that day. It expresses the themes of that day. And so when we look at the Torah reading for any given holiday, we look at it, that's the Torah Shebichtav, where's the Torah Sheba'al Peh for that day? Where's the oral Torah for that day? And so that's what Moshe Rabbeinu instituted, that idea, that the Torah reading should be what gives us, and where do you see that most beautifully expressed is in the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. In Nehemiah Chet, where they read the Torah, and they read the Torah for, first of all, they're educating the people, and they read it on Rosh Hashanah, they read it on Sukkot, and this was the beginning of the educational renaissance of the Jewish people in the times of Ezra and Nehemiah. Through the reading of Torah first, and then the explanation, and the analysis that came with B'som Sechel Vayavinu B'Mikra, that they made them understand the text, and and through that they came to a deeper understanding of Torah through the holiday readings of the Torah. So this is what we do on Tisha B'Av as well. We have a Torah reading that's special for Tisha B'Av. So in every sense, Tisha B'Av is like a moed. It's like a holiday. We even have two keynotes that underscore this. One, as I spoke about last night. If you were there, if you weren't, I'm going to rehash a little bit about what I said. For me, the signature kina of the night is Alechem Eda Kedosha. Alechem Eda Kedosha, which is the kina that spells out the parallels or the contrasts between Pesach and Tisha B'Av. Right? It talks about Eshal mikem she'elot. Man nishtana alayla hazeh mikol halelot. That's the refrain. Why is this night different from all other nights? But instead of it being in a good way, it's in a bad way. And so for each one it says, Madua belil Pesach. Why is it on the night of Pesach? We do all of these celebratory things. We have a beautiful table that's set. But tonight we have nothing. We're sitting with bitterness and sadness. Why is it Madua belil Pesach? We have the Hallel. Tonight we have the Kinot. Why is it on the night of Pesach we're sitting and drinking a cup cups of wine, but now we're drinking the cup of bitterness. All of these analogies, some of them are obviously metaphoric. We're not really drinking a cup on Tisha B'Av, but the idea of connecting the two. And as I had mentioned, Pesach, and if you want to know what day Pesach is going to be in a given year, it's always on the same day of the week as Tisha B'Av. It's always on the same week as the day of the week as Tisha B'Av that year. So it's going to be Tuesday. You can know now, because it's always the same. So there is a link. In fact, there's some that put an egg on, when they put the egg on the Seder plate, they say, one of the reasons is because it reminds you of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, many people eat eggs on Tisha B'Av. They don't have polo ades. They don't, not the version. The other people, they eat eggs, right? What? You can't. But I'm saying that's their main thing. That's their main thing. On the plate, the Seder plate, the egg reminds them of Tisha B'Av, but there's a connection between Tisha B'Av and Pesach. What's the connection? It's a reversal. It's reversal. Pesach is coming out of Galut. The Jews were in Galut for hundreds of years. The Galut was that they were living in Mitzrayim. That was the first exile. They really belonged in Canaan. They really belonged in Israel. They were in Mitzrayim, persecuted and oppressed for hundreds of years. They came out. Hashem's providence revealed itself. It was amazing. It was a celebration. It was a revolution. And now, what is Tisha B'Av? The undoing of all of that. The withdrawal of the divine presence from the Jewish people. Sending us back into exile again. Back into under the hegemony and the mastery of foreign powers who dictate to us how to live our lives and what to do. And you can see even today, even with a sovereign state of Israel, how sovereign can our sovereign state be if they're still taking direction to some extent or another from people with other agendas and who hold some sway over them. They hold economic sway over them. They hold our bullets. They hold our ammunition. Whatever they have. So fortunately, that's not to. It hasn't proved to be too much of a detriment in recent times, but it's still there. It's a reality. We're not independent fully of the dictates of foreign powers, and we shouldn't imagine that we are. In any case, the exit from Israel and the entry obviously are the reverse. The reaction to each is the reverse. There's another Kina that's actually read in the morning. It's both in the Kina. It's the only thing that I know of, and I was a Baal Tefillah for a decade for Ashkenazim before, the last 13, 14 years I've been purely among Sfaradim, but before that, for about a decade, I was among Ashkenazim, and I used to go to their keynotes, which are not as good as ours, because most of them require commentaries of, they have more commentary than lines on the page, of the keynote, because they have their keynote are from HaKalir, Elazar Kalir. So the Kalir poetry is not Kalir at all. So it's very unkalir, and you can't. It's difficult to. It's full of allusions to all kinds of rabbinic texts and all kinds of things that people don't know, and all kinds of midrashim that you need a thick commentary in order to understand it. Whereas most of our keynotes are regular Hebrew. In fact, Ibn Ezra was very critical of Kalir and said, why do you write in a form that nobody can understand? Why do you write in a form that is that does violence to Hebrew grammar in addition to being incoherent to people who don't know all of your literary allusions? It's like writing in code. Why would you do that? And that's typical of, not to get distracted, but on Tisha B'Av, but that's typical of certain elements of Ashkenazic tradition, which were much more rabbinic focused than Tanakh focused. That Ibn Ezra said you should write like Shlomo HaMelech. When he wrote his tefillah, he wrote in regular Hebrew. He didn't write some weird acrostic thing that nobody can understand without a commentary. He wrote regular piyut or regular tefillah. He said, why don't you write like the Tanakh? Because in the Sephardic culture, first of all, Tanakh was the foundational text, as it should be for everybody. The foundational text is Tanakh. And there's a sense that tefillah and readings should be connected to human experience. And having a text that you have to study for hours in order to understand cannot move your heart. It can't, because it's not intelligible. When you read Echa, even if you don't know some of the words, the basic message can move you. If you read Kinot, our Kinot, the basic message can move you. If you read Kalir, you don't even know what you're reading until you read commentaries on it. So it's very difficult to be moved, impacted on an emotional level, on an experiential level by such texts. But that was typical of a culture that moved very far away. The Ashkenazi culture moved very far away from Tanakh and much more towards rabbinic literature and Talmud. So these are like tefillot written for Talmudists and not really as much for ordinary folk. So but in any case, that wasn't the reason I mentioned that. The one Kina that appears in both the Ashkenazic and Sephardic Tisha B'Av liturgy is one that. The refrain of it is B'tzeiti miMitzrayim, B'tzeiti miYerushalayim. It's Esh Tukad B'kirbi is the name of the Kina. Esh Tukad B'kirbi B'haloti al Levavi, B'tzeiti miMitzrayim, and B'tzeiti miYerushalayim. So what it does is it contrasts. It's actually a very long Kina. It's very long. It takes a few pages to get through. And what it does is it will say, I remember the cloud of glory and the pillar of fire when I left Mitzrayim, but I remember the horrible, bands of marauders and evil henchmen when I left Yerushalayim. So it's contrasting all the good. There must be at least 50 lines to it. In other words, or 40 lines to it of contrast. The great brachot that they had, man from Shamayim, and water coming out of a rock when they left Mitzrayim, but when they left Yerushalayim they had no food and they had no, they suffered. And it contrasts both the spiritual and the physical. In other words, the physical blessing that came with the exit from Mitzrayim and the physical suffering that came with the exit from Jerusalem, and the spiritual suffering or the spiritual blessing that came with leaving Mitzrayim, and the spiritual klala that came with leaving Yerushalayim. So it's a very, very powerful Kina. But again, it emphasizes this connection between Tisha B'Av and Pesach. One is the emergence from exile, and one is the return to exile, which we don't want. There's and I think that the real key that I wanted to mention, that I wanted to get to in all of this was the Moed issue that I mentioned earlier, which is, why don't we say Tachanun on Tisha B'Av? How is it a Moed? How can we say that it's a Moed because it's going to be a Moed in the future? How is that a Moed now? How does that impact our practice now? And the answer, I believe, lies in a better understanding of what a Moed is and what Tisha B'Av is. Because if you understand what a Moed is, usually what people think of Moadim, or they think of holidays, it's the regular, ordinary people, not Talmidei Chachamim, not the Vilna Gaon, not the Rambam. I'm saying a regular person, they think of of a holiday as an opportunity to have fun. It's a pleasant time. It's a happy time for celebration. That's all true. I'm not saying it is. And when they think of Tisha B'Av, they think of a horrible time, which is the most difficult time and a painful time, suffering time, and even just the experience of the fast is painful. Forget about what we're mourning about. So that's how they look at it. So from that, if you're looking at that angle, it's difficult to see any commonality in substance between Tisha B'Av and other Moadim, because one is happy, one is sad. But if you look at a Moed from a different angle, which is the purpose of Moadim, a Moed is Moedei Hashem. Purpose of a Moed is to come closer to a knowledge of Hashem, to come to a better understanding and deepen your relationship with Hashem. That's the purpose of a Moed. There are just different vehicles of getting there. So one vehicle is through recalling the events of national salvation in the past, the nisim v'niflaot of the past, the barachot that we have. And reflecting upon that will bring us closer to an understanding, seeing the Yad Hashem in our history in a positive way. We see what Hashem did in Mitzrayim, liberating us not just physically, also mentally and intellectually from the servitude of Mitzrayim. And what that means today. How are we again entrenched in a society that has enslaved us, and how can we break free of it? Well, we have to look back at the lessons of Yetziat Mitzrayim and apply it to ourselves. That's what the Pesach is celebrating, the tools Hashem gave us to liberate ourselves, not just once in history in the time of Mitzrayim, but again and again in every generation. We have to look at ourselves like we came out of Mitzrayim. We go through it again. That's a positive connection to God through a Moed. Shavuot is not just about Hashem gave the Torah a long time ago, so let's have a party and eat lots of food and have fun. That's not what the point of the holiday is. The point of the holiday is it's an opportunity to think about, Hashem is not just the liberator. Hashem is not just the one that gives freedom and the Goel. He's also the one who teaches us Torah. He's also the source of knowledge. And look at how He brought us in the revelation knowledge of Torah to be able to draw, and not just to the Torah that we know, but He revealed also the Torah that's the hidden Torah, the Sodot of Torah, which is reflected in the fact that we read Maseh Merkavah. We read about the angels of the divine chariot as the Haftarah for Shavuot. He revealed to us profound knowledge, and we should celebrate that unique benefit that we have, that Hashem is the one who gives us Torah. And He continues. We say Notena Torah even now. We don't say Natan Torah. We don't say He gave it. We say He gives it. He continues to give. When we seek, He gives. Who teaches us? Hashem. Melamed Torah L'Amo Yisrael. And then you have Sukkot. Sukkot is Hashem sustained and protected the Jews in that special bubble that they basically had in the Midbar to ensure that they wouldn't be, to be able to survive. Hashem is the one who's the Magen. He's the one who protects us. He's the one who provides us with the security. He's the source of our bitachon. He's the source of our security in the world, as we, that ensures our ability to not worry about the changes of life, the vicissitudes, the precariousness of life. That we're able to have a source of bitachon that's solid and that's reliable. That we don't rely on any of the fleeting phenomena in this world as our source of security. That is the celebration. But there's another aspect. That's all midat harachamim. That's all Hashem's kind face. But there's also za'am apo that we read about in Tisha B'Av. That's also real. That's also something real. There's also midat hadin. There's also the divine judgment. It's not just all roses and happy faces and smiley faces. There's also midat hadin. And people, they hate the klalot in the Torah. When they read it, they say, this is horrible. Hashem has to write all of this, castigating us and threatening us with the most horrific punishments. That's the midat hadin. Just like the midat harachamim, the midat chesed of Hashem is unfathomable to us. It's infinite. We can't plumb the depths of it. Chasdei, we even said even in Megillat Echa, he says, Chasdei Hashem lo tamnu, ki lo tamnu. Right? The kindness of Hashem never ends. That's also true even in Tisha B'Av. We can think about that. There's an infinity to it, but there's also a seeming infinity to the midat hadin. It's not infinite, thankfully. It has a limit, but there's an enormity of magnitude to the midat hadin also. And so there's one holiday where we reflect on midat hadin. There's one day that we reflect on midat hadin, and where we stand vis-a-vis midat hadin, and the examples of the manifestation of midat hadin, of the divine judgment, that side to Hashem, the side to Hashem which is justice, not only that which is chesed and kindness. And so the holiday of midat hadin is Tisha B'Av. It's also a moed. Why is it a moed? Because it's supposed to bring us closer to a knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's just bringing us closer to a knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu through reflecting not on midat harachamim but on midat hadin. So therefore the holiday can't be observed in the way that a holiday of midat harachamim is observed. Can't be observed with celebrating and dancing and eating and drinking and all that. It has to be observed in a way that recognizes that we're under the midat hadin. It has to be accepted and absorbed as people who recognize that the klalot, that we're exiled. We're not. We are under, to some measure, thank God, not to the full measure at this time. We're not suffering from the absolute worst, but we are under the midat hadin, and we feel the brunt of it. We feel the consequences of it, and so reflecting on the events of the past and on the current situation brings us to a somber type of holiday. But why is it a holiday? Because the definition of a moed is a day that's consecrated for a higher recognition of Hashem, coming to a higher recognition and relationship with Hashem. That is the goal, and because that's the goal, it's a moed. Ironically, yes.
Are there other places other than Megillat Echa that moed is used? The opposite of what we're used to.
Where moed could be used? Usually a moed is any kind of appointed time. In Megillat Echa, it's being used specifically to refer either to the day of Tisha B'Av, which was called the Moed Lishbor Bachurai, or it's being used with reference to the Moed Hashem, the holidays. But yeah, you have even in the Torah, La Moed Asher, that Hashem brought the baby to Sarah at the Moed that He said. So you have the word Moed is used as any appointed time. Any appointed time is a moed. Yeah. You have oil moed. Oil moed is the place of meeting. So it's and what does Onkelos translate to oil moed? Shkan zimna. So it's from the word zman, time. Right? It's a place that there's appointed times to meet in the Mishkan. So there's even a couple of things that I made a note of that I want to forget, because I know that I'm tired on the fast days. I'll forget that there's a minhag actually that's brought in the Kaf. There's an interesting thing in the Kaf HaChaim which I don't have accessible to me right now. I'm sure we have it downstairs, but I don't have it because I'm living out of only a few suitcases still. I'm in exile on multiple levels still, since I don't have a house yet. No, it's okay. I remember what it is. He brings an interesting thing. He says, that we sit on chairs, obviously, in the afternoon on Tisha B'Av. We sit on the ground in the morning. And he says that if somebody wants to be machmir and sit on the ground, they're not allowed to. So you should not sit on the ground in the afternoon. Why? He says something I thought was interesting. He says, because it's a moed. How could you sit on the ground? But we're all mourning and suffering. What do you mean it's a moed? So he says there's a certain sense of kavod for the moed, even though it's a day of midat hadin, even though it's a day of suffering. It's a day that has a certain kavod to it. It's a day that we're drawing closer to God. They say the Mashiach is going to be born on Tisha B'Av. Why is the Mashiach going to be born on Tisha B'Av? Not because we know the birthday of the Mashiach. It's not talking about, right now in a hospital, we should check all the maternity wards and we're going to find the Mashiach. Not what it means. What it means is that the reflection that needs to happen in Am Yisrael to bring them to the place they need to be to deserve the Mashiach is starting on Tisha B'Av. But that makes it a moed because that means we're coming closer to God through Tisha B'Av. Incidentally, one of the reasons why I suspect that also in a house of mourning there's no tachanunim is because if you look at a house of mourning, it's very similar in this way to chagim. In other words, a house where what do they compare Shivat Yemei Avelut to Shivat Yemei Mishteh of a Chatan. When a person gets married, they have the 7 days of celebration. When a person dies, you have 7 days of mourning. And where do they learn the 7 days of mourning from? They learn 7 days of mourning from the Chag. I'm going to turn your holiday into a mourning. Just like a holiday is 7 days, Sukkot 7 days, so too the Evel is 7 days. Why is that? They don't have anything to do with each other. One person, they lost a relative, they're sad, they're suffering. The other one is a holiday. Why should they be compared? The answer is, for that individual, that suffering is also a way to come closer to God. In other words, everything in Torah is to come closer to Hashem. Everything in Torah is to come to a better understanding of Hashem and to bring you closer to the ways of Hashem. Even those things, even the moments of greatest joy in the Chatan and Kala, they have Sheva Barachot to remind them that the ultimate purpose of this union and the ultimate purpose of this celebration is that we're creating a Bayit Neman B'Yisrael. There's a much bigger picture here. We're continuing the Jewish people and we're going to serve we're going to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a team. That's the Simcha. That's why everybody comes to a wedding and they dance around the Chatan and Kala, because they're showing we recognize that even though this isn't our personal benefit, this is a celebration for Am Yisrael. And when it comes to mourning, everybody comes to the Shiva. Why does everybody come? And they say, Tenuchamu min hashamayim. May you be comforted from heaven, which means to say that what will give you strength when you lose a loved one, it's your relationship with Hashem. Hashem is going to give you the strength. And we, as the Jewish people, as the visitors, come to remind you that even though that relative is gone, the Jewish people are still here, and your purpose as a Jew is still here. So you can get lost. Everybody gets lost in the joy of their wedding a little bit, and everybody gets lost in the joy of in the mourning, in the sadness of their loss. But ultimately, the goal is to use those experiences as fuel, as energy, to bring us closer to our ultimate goal, as hard as it is. And that's why Chag and Evel are similar to one another in that way, and because they both lead us towards the same goal. That being the case, we can understand why Tisha B'Av ultimately is a moed. Now, what then is the reason why it will turn into a happy day in the future? What's the reason why it'll be a time of simcha in the future? Because the day of Tisha B'Av is assessing our status insofar as the Midat Hadin is concerned. Insofar as the Midat Hadin is concerned, where do we stand? Well, not too well right now. Right? The state of the union is not so good. But there will be a time where the outcome of this analysis and reflection is going to be very happy. And that's the times of the Mashiach. In the times of the Geulah, we're going to look at the situation of Midat Hadin and say, you know what? We are a people living in our land. We are a people living according to the Torah. We are a people living in peace. We're a people living in harmony. We're a people who are a light unto all the nations, or la'amim. All of the nations of the world are streaming to the Beit HaMikdash to learn from us the right way, instead of trying to tell us the right way. Instead of the people in the United Nations trying to tell us what the right way is, our nation will be telling them what the right way is. And that's when things are like that, and we look at the Midat Hadin and ask, where do we stand in Hashem's judgment? We can finally say, it's a day of Sason B'Simcha. So it will continue to be a Chag. It's a check-in point for Midat Hadin. Right now it's a Moed that unfortunately leads us to sad results, sad consequence, sad reaction on our part. But in the future, it could be a day where we check in on the same barometer, we check in the same vital signs of the Jewish people, so to speak, and we come out with a very different verdict. Come out with Sason B'Simcha. We come out with a Moed that's not a Moed Lishbor Bachurai, not a Moed of tragedy, but it's a Moed to celebrate the fact that we have had the zechut, that we've reached the level where we are zakaim, where we are worthy in the eyes of Hashem to stand before Hashem and to serve Him in Yerushalayim. And Be'ezrat Hashem, B'karov Yamenu, we should see a time that this will happen. But it all begins with Tisha B'Av. It all begins with this Moed. And of course, that doesn't necessarily begin with one Tisha B'Av. It may take many cycles of Tisha B'Av before we achieve an understanding that of what we need to do, of the steps we need to take to make it a reality. But it will happen. We have the confidence that it will happen. And if we didn't have the confidence that it would happen, we wouldn't be observing Tisha B'Av. Jews don't just sit and suffer for nothing. If we didn't have confidence that one day this Moed would be a happy Moed, that one day these lessons, we're going to wake up and we're going to say, you know what? Sheker nachalu avotenu, like it says in the Nabi. Everything that we have, that we've been living by, is the wrong thing. We need to reorient ourselves to the Torah reading of this morning, that the only reality is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we need to refocus our sights on what really is critical. As soon as we start making those moves, we're going to see the world move to facilitate our ultimate Geulah. B'mehera b'yameinu. Amen.